In this video, we are going to talk about how to configure an AWS Application Load Balancer for CloudBees CI on traditional platforms. If you are hosting CloudBees CI on traditional platforms on AWS, then you might want to put that behind an Application Load Balancer. However, you're not really sure where to start. That's where this video comes in. So here's where we're starting today. I have a VPC. I have 2 public subnets and 2 private subnets, each of those in different availability zones. I've set up a Bastion box inside of one of the public subnets, and I've set up 2 instances in each of the private subnets, one for my operations center and one for my client controller. I've also set up a wildcard ACM certificate to use on our load balancer. Now in this video, I am not using CloudFormation or Terraform or Pulumi or any other type of infrastructure as code solution. What we're going to be looking at today is how to do this through the console. I'll leave it up to you as an exercise to figure out how to do these steps within your infrastructure as code provider of choice. So I've SSH'd into my Bastion, and from my Bastion, I have gone ahead and SSH'd into my Operations Center. Now, the only thing that I've done with the Operations Center instance so far is I've just done an installation and I've set up my sysconfig file. Now, I do want to go ahead and take a moment to take a look at the sysconfig files. There will be a gist that's going to be linked down in the description that has the configurations for my sysconfigs for both the Operations Center and for the client controller. You'll be able to refer to the gist to figure out where to put these values when you're setting up your own version of this. So let's go and take a look at the sysconfig file. So I'm going to do a sudo vi etc sysconfig and CloudBees core OC. And I am running this on the Amazon Linux 2 distribution. So let's go ahead and take a look now at the changes that we have here for our Operations Center. The first place that we're going to look at is our Jenkins Java options. This setting right here, headless equals true, is there by default. I've added in all of these other sections here, and these are pretty standard for me. I put in prefer IPv4 stack equals to true. I do that pretty much all the time. I set up a separate temp dir so it's not just going to /temp. And I have it in varcache CloudBees core OC /temp, and I've already pre-created this directory and the ownership is correct. So this directory already exists. I've set my time zones to both New York, both on the Jelly tag and just for user time zone. Since I am not using CloudBees HA in this installation, I have disabled the HA subsystem by setting it to false. I've set Beekeeper no full upgrade to true. You can refer to the Beekeeper documentation to understand what that means. But these last 2 items are the most important. And this is a very key item that you cannot forget anytime you're using the AWS Application Load Balancer or any kind of reverse proxy, whether it's something like an F5 or Nginx or whatever. These last 2 values are really important. And it's the Hudson.TCP slave agent listener .hostname and also port. So we've set the hostname to the hostname of my Operations Center. Now remember that my Operations Center instance is inside of a private subnet, so therefore it has a DNS name of ec2.internal. I could have just used the IP address, which in this case is 10.0.101.185, but I just kept the host name here just because. And I also have my port set to 50,000. Now we'll take a look at where this 50,000 comes into play in just a few moments. So that was the first thing, Jenkins Java options. The next one is right below the Jenkins port. Just to keep things consistent, I'm going to use port 8080 for my Operations Center. By default, it's 8888, but I just changed it to 8080 because the default for the client controller is also 8080. So just to keep everything simple. What this also means is that from the backside of the load balancer to the front side of both the Operations Center and the client controller, those are going to be in the clear. In other words, they're not secure from an HTTPS perspective. And finally, one more thing. We're going to go all the way to the bottom of this file and take a look at the Jenkins args section. And I've added in a -- plugin root varcache CloudBees core OC /plugins. Now, this folder does not need to be pre-created, much like the temp that we saw up above. This will be automatically created once this instance starts up. So let's go ahead and exit out of this. And let's go ahead and do our start. So I'm going to do sudo. No, before we do the start, let's do a netstat-an grep 8080. Nothing listing on that, and just to make sure that I didn't forget something else, 8888 all gone. So I don't have a listener right now at all happening on 8080. And in fact, I'll go ahead and do one more thing. Sudo system cutl-l status. And I'll do CloudBees, core OC. And we can see right now that it's loaded, but it's inactive. So now let's go ahead and start up our Operations Center. We'll do our status check again. We can see it's active and running, and we can verify that everything's running as expected. Here's our parameters that we were calling out a few moments ago. Here's our plugin root. So everything's starting up, looking pretty good so far. Let's go ahead and look at our log, CloudBees core OC, CloudBees core OC log. Okay. So now it appears to have started all the way up. A little hard to see here. Yep, we're at the very end of that. So let's check our netstat. Not 8888, it's not listening there, it's listening on 8080. And we have a listener on 8080 on IPv4. So that's what we're expecting to see. We're going to need this information as we set up our application load balancer in just a few moments. So let's go ahead and set up this application load balancer. So we're going to go to our management console, EC2. We're going to go down to load balancers. And just in case you're looking at this at some point after this video has been released, which of course you can't see the video before it's been released, this video is being recorded on August 24th, 2021. So when you go in and look at your AWS console, things may look different because it's always changing in the console there. So just keep that in mind as you're going through here. Just remember the pieces that we're calling out. Right now we're creating our load balancer. So let's go ahead and create our load balancer. So we'll create load balancer. We're going to select application load balancer. I'm going to give mine a name of CloudBees. It'll be internet facing. That's my choice. You may want yours to be on internal or private. I'm only doing IPv4. My listener is going to be HTTPS only. So that's it. So people will have to know to go straight there. I'm not concerned about doing redirects. Sure, I could do redirects and stuff through my target groups, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change my availability zones to select both of these, and I'm going to select my public subnets because I want my load balancer to be on the public side since this is an internet-facing load balancer. So I need my load balancer to be on the public side subnets, and then we'll be routing to our instances that are on private subnets. Let's go ahead and configure security settings. We're going to select a certificate that I already have. We'll leave the default security policy. Let's create a new security group. And this is just TCP, so I'm only allowing in port 443 traffic. That's it. And I'm going to allow it in from anywhere. Again, I'm being lazy. And by the time you see this, it's all gone. Configure routing. Now here's where we're going to be setting up targeting our instances. Now the first one that we're going to do is for our Operations Center. I'm going to short name it as OC. The instance target type is what we want to select. The protocol is going to be HTTP because we do not have any kind of certificates on the instances. So that's just going to be in the clear. The port is going to be 8080 because that's where the Operations Center is listening. We'll leave the default of HTTP 1. And the path that we're going to check is going to be /HA/health-check. This is an endpoint that doesn't have any kind of authentication against it, so we won't get any kind of 403s. We either get a 200 or we get a 503, and that's it. So we want to find the 200. So anytime we find a 200, that tells me, yep, this is up and going. It's fine. This is what we want to use. Even though we have our HA subsystem disabled, think back to the Java arguments that we said earlier, it was HA false. This endpoint is still available to us that we can still check against to get a 200. So to know that, hey, are you there? Are you there? Without any kind of authentication at all, it'll say, yep, I'm here. So this is the endpoint that we want to check. Let's register our target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my Operations Center. I'm going to click on Add to Register. Notice that it's on port 8080. We can see here that it's already running. So far it's looking pretty good. Let's click on Review. And then we'll go ahead and scroll down through here. Everything's looking pretty good. We have our path correct. Let's go ahead and click on Create. Now this creation is fairly quick, and it successfully created the load balancer. However, it's still provisioning, and this provisioning takes a few moments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward through this, and then we'll pick up right where we left off. Okay, now that our load balancer has turned active, I want to make sure that it's actually working as expected. So I'm going to click on Description, and I'm going to copy this DNS name. And let's see what happens when we go to this DNS name. Now I will need to put HTTPS in front. Potential security risk ahead. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Click on Advanced. Bad cert. We know that. Accept the risk. And now we're getting the screen that we would expect to get once we start setting up our Operations Center. Because remember, all we've done is install it, but we haven't actually configured it yet. So our next step is to create our DNS entry that will make our SSL certificate valid. So let's go into Route 53, which is where I have my domain hosted. And I'm going to create a new record. The record name is going to be CloudBees. I'm going to leave it as an A record, but I'm going to come over here and click on this alias slider. So now I'm going to route traffic to my Application Load Balancer. I'm going to choose the region of US East 1. And then here I have my one and only load balancer. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Records. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go back over to here, and we're going to change it to HTTPS cloudbees.codes101.com. And let's see what happens. We can see here, popped right in. Our SSL certificate is showing up correctly. In fact, we take a look at more information and view the certificate. And there's our wildcard codes101.com. So everything's working as expected, the way we want it right now, so that's great. So our next step here is to go ahead and set up our Operations Center. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and grab the information that I need here. Go back over to my shell. I am on my Operations Center, so I'm going to say sudo cat that, grab my value. I'm going to just request a trial license. And click on Submit. I'm going to install suggested plugins. This will take just a moment. There is an incremental upgrade available, so I'm going to go ahead and take that. I'm going to create my user. Admin, 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 admin. Yes, it's not secure. Yes, it will be gone by the time you see this. Save and continue. Now notice this. This instance configuration for the URL is https cloudbees.codes101.com. This is what I want my Jenkins URL to be for the Operations Center. Said differently, anytime I type in the base domain, I want to go straight to the Operations Center. We'll see in a few moments how we want to access our client controllers. Let's go and click on Save and Finish, and click on Start Using Operations Center. Everything looks pretty normal there. Just to make sure it's working fine, I'm going to go ahead and do a restart. And yes. So we'll give this just a moment to restart. We'll log back in, and then we'll get ready to start setting up our client controller. Okay, let's go ahead and log back in. Okay, first up, I'm going to create a folder called Controllers. Not very exciting, but it's okay. Click Save. Within this folder, I'm going to create an item called CC1, and I'm going to select Client Controller. We'll click OK, and we'll just click on Save. No changes necessary. Now I'm going to hang out right here because I'm going to need these connection details once I spin up my client controller. So now's probably just as good a time as any to go ahead and do that. So let's get back over to our Bastion. Where is it? There it is. Okay, I'm on my Bastion. Let me look for my 102. And this is my client controller. Much like what we saw on our Operations Center sysconfig, I want to go back through that, but I want to show you something that's very different for our client controller. So we'll do a sudo vi etc sysconfig CloudBees core CM. And we'll take a look at our Java Jenkins args here. Where am I? There we go. Excuse me, Jenkins Java options, not args. And this looks very similar, almost to the letter, exactly the same as what we saw with our Operations Center, other than things changing to CloudBees core CM and the name of our host name here for TCP Slave Agent Listener, to where this is now the IP address of the client controller itself, which is a 102 address. So now what we want to do is to go ahead and scroll down a little bit more. Remember, the default port for the client controller is 8080. No changes necessary there, but let's go now to the bottom. So much like what we did in the Operations Center, I have a plugin root variable that's here. No problem. But this is what makes the difference. We're going to add a prefix to any request coming in of /cc1/. The leading and the trailing slashes are very, very important, so don't forget those. So what's going to happen is when we go to cloudbees.codes1001.com/cc1, that's going to take us to our client controller. If we leave off the /cc1, then we'll go to the Operations Center. Follow? Okay, if not, just go along with me and you'll see it in just a few moments. Okay, so I'm going to exit this. And let's go ahead and make sure that nothing is running. Shouldn't be, but status CloudBees core CM. Okay, all that's done. Let's go ahead and do a restart. Why restart? Have it. There's restart. Let's check our status. We can see it's active and running. We see our prefix here. Keep this prefix in mind. This is going to show up again, not only within our client controller, but also within the ALB. So before we go back over to the ALB, let's make sure that we are up and running. So I'm going to go ahead, or cm.log. We go to the bottom, and we should see here Jenkins is fully up and running. So I'm pretty happy with that. So far so good with that. Let's just do a net stat. Look for 8080 just because. Okay, it's all good. All right, so it appears our client controller is ready to roll. Let's go back over to our load balancer settings. Now, what we're going to need to do here is we are going to need to set up a new target group, and we're going to target anytime the prefix is /cc1, we're going to send that over to our cc1 instance. So let's go back down to target groups. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the target group that we need for our cc1 target. So create target group instances. We'll give it a name of cc1. Protocol is going to be HTTP. The port's going to be 8080. We're going to select our VPC that we're in. HTTP1, that's fine. Now, our health check path is going to be a little bit different than with the Operations Center. Remember that we put a prefix on our CC1 startup that was -- prefix equals /CC1/. So that means I need to put a CC1 here /HA/health-check. Just to verify that before we go anywhere, I'm going to copy that. Let's do a curl --head localhost 8080. I think I got it all. Yep. So if we check that, we're getting back a 200. So we should be fine there. Let's go ahead and click on next. Now we need to select the instance that we want to target. So we're going to select our CC1 instance. 8080, we're going to include as pending below. So let's go down here, see what it looks like. It's pending, looks good. And now let's go ahead and click on create target, which is a little off the screen. So now if we take a look at this, we now have a CC1 target and an OC target. But we can also see here right now that the CC1 has not been associated with the load balancer. So that's what we need to do next. So let's go back over to our load balancer. It's a little hard to see. Let's click on listeners. Now let's scroll right. And what we want to do is we want to view and edit rules. So let's go to view and edit rules. We need to add a new rule because remember, we want to match, and then if we don't find anything, it's going to end up at the Operations Center. So I'm going to click on plus. I'm going to insert a rule. I'm going to add a condition if the path is /CC1/*. So if it starts with CC1 and anything after that, then what we're going to do is we are going to forward to our target group of CC1. And that's it. And we can see here that we're basing this off of the Operations Center setup. We're forwarding to OC down here. What we're going to do is we're going to forward to CC1 if the path starts with /CC1/*. So let's go ahead and click on Save. Let's review this real quick. So if path is /CC1/*, then forward to CC1. Otherwise, we're just going to end up on the Operations Center. So let's go ahead and set up our client controller. Now we already have our window set up here for CC1, but I can't really click over this because this is just an object within the Operations Center referencing where our real controller is going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new window, https cloudbees.codes101.com/cc1/. And now we're on our unlock screen for the controller. So let's go ahead and get this set up. So we'll say sudo cat that. It looks okay. We're going to join our Operations Center. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to get my connection detail string from the Operations Center. And I'm going to click Submit. Now, if everything has worked correctly, we should get our install plugins on the next page, which we did. That's great. If we didn't, what does that mean? This is the part about the TCP slave agent listener host names that are really important. By adding those startup parameters for TCP slave agent listener .hostname specifically, .port is important as well. We'll take a look at that in a moment. What that means is when I'm making my connection from my client controller back to the Operations Center, because I've specified a TCP slave agent listener hostname, I am completely bypassing my load balancer and making a direct connection from my client controller back to my Operations Center. Completely bypassing the load balancer. How does it do that? It's really simple. Let me give you a quick check here. I'm going to do a curl --head, and I am currently on my client controller. I'm going to say HTTP // let's see what we can do now. We can use our real name now because this is a legitimate endpoint. Whoops, let's go back here. In fact, we're going to do HTTPS. So what do I get back when I make this call? Well, we get back a bunch of parameters. But the parameter that matters, or the header that really matters here, is that we need this parameter right here, x Jenkins CLI host. Notice this IP address, the 10.0.1.0.1. We know that this IP address that's buried in this host name that's here is the IP address of our operations center. So when the client controller is starting up and it gets this information back in the headers, if it sees this x Jenkins CLI host, it's going to ignore the parameter that it's actually that it's being given, which in this case is the DNS of our load balancer, and instead goes and knows that, oh, I need to make a direct connect against this host name or IP address and specifically this port. And we'll take again a look at this port and how that's set up in just a moment. But this is the secret sauce of how this works. Because we have included the TCP slave agent listener.hostname in the operations center, when the client controller makes the requests to the load balancer, and it knows that, oh, okay, I'm giving you back this information, the target group, since it doesn't match CC1, is going on to the operations center, so all this information we're getting back is about the operations center, then the client controller now has the information to completely bypass the load balancer when trying to connect back to the operations center. Let's go ahead and click on Install Suggested Plugins for the client controller. Again, this will take just a few moments. Also, an upgrade for this, we'll take that. We'll go ahead and create our admin user for this because we don't have RBAC set up on the Operations Center. Again, this is like a fresh new type install. Save and continue. Start using the controller. Now, let's take a look at a couple of things here. First off, our URL is https CloudBees codes 101 /cc1. Our certificate is set up and working correctly. Whoops, I hit the wrong one. Our certificate is correct. We can verify that everything looks good by taking a look at the certificate here. All that looks good. We can also take a look at, by clicking here, we go back up to the Operations Center, and we can see here that our controller is shiny and happy right now. So if we click over here, watch the banner, we'll move from Operations Center down to Client Controller. So all of that's working out fine. So we have our load balancer, we have two target groups, we have two instances, we have a load balancer across public subnets, we have instances in private subnets. All of this is just working. Before we leave this, I want to take you through that TCP slave agent listener port. Now, you'll remember that we set the port to 50,000 on both the Operations Center and on the client controller. Now, with the client controller, we're currently not using it, and I'll show you how to activate it. But by default, for the Operations Center, if you click on Manage Jenkins and go down to Configure Global Security, what you're going to see here is the agent section, and you've got a fixed port of 50,000. The 50,000 that we defined in our startup parameter, our -d for .port, is this 50,000. So whatever you put in your -d has to match what you see here on screen right now for this fixed port. So if I decided to change this to 50,010, I would need to go and change my -d from 50,000 to 50,010. So whatever is in your sysconfig file also needs to match whatever you have here. They need to be the same values, they're just not saved in the same place. So this is 50,000. But this was the Operations Center. By default, it's on in the Operations Center. If we go back over and take a look at our client controller, here we go, Manage Jenkins, and again, go down to Configure Global Security. The agents that are here by default are actually disabled because you may not have any agents connecting into your client controller. In other words, you're making an inbound connection from a Windows agent is a typical answer, or maybe you're doing an inbound agent from Linux or Mac due to reasons because you can't use SSH. Whatever that reason may be, that would be your reason. Well, in that case, you would also go here and set up a fixed port of 50,000. Again, you can pick whatever port number you want. I chose in TCP slave agent listener .port to be 50,000. So the short of it is, if you set TCP slave agent listener .port to some value, that value should also match what you have set up for your agents within Configure Global Security. So this was a little bit longer video helping you walk through how to set this up with CloudBees CI for traditional platforms on AWS. Now, what should you do differently? Well, as you saw, I set up my load balancer to be internet facing on public subnets, fully wide open to the world. Would you set up your CloudBees CI installation that way? Probably not. But for my examples of showing you how to do it, it should work. Now, what's your environment going to look like? Is it going to be completely private? Are you going in on a VPN, or are you coming across Direct Connect? All of those things are going to impact how you set up. Also, instead of going in and pointing and clicking and setting these things up, you should be using some sort of infrastructure as code solution, whether that's CloudFormation natively with AWS or Terraform or Pulumi. Any of those things would work out great for you. Just don't point and click and expect that to be truth all the time. Let your definition of your infrastructure also be as code. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBeesDevs. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching this really long video, and we'll see you in the next one.